I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
You know, when I first started teaching about 4 years ago, my daughter reminded me that one of the biggest fears that people have is public speaking. In fact, it's second only to death. So I'm always really aware of the fact that when we do class discussions, that some kids, or even though they're college students, are going to have a little bit of performance anxiety. And in fact, I kind of had that only when I was doing something like singing, which I don't do well, or anything else like that. Maybe athletics, which I also don't do well. But because Sarah started out doing a lot of things, dancing, gymnastics, baton twirling, a little bit of modeling, I was always thinking about her. And the one time she really had performance anxiety, this was during the time that she was taking piano and song and singing. Yes, I was that mom. And she suddenly had a meltdown right before her recital. And she suddenly said, well, I don't want to be there. I want to go home now. And I realized after I refrained very hard from yelling at her that maybe I wasn't the best person to coach her through this because she was having really anxiety. So I stepped back. I went out to her teacher and said, Cassandra, can you talk to her? Because I'm probably not the right person to talk to about this. And so she did. And she went in and she said, and she kind of calmed her down, and Sarah was wonderful. Well, most of us, if we have kids, at some point they're going to do something either on the playing field or maybe some kind of artistic something, and they're going to get that bout of anxiety. And so today we want to talk about maybe how to help your child, or if you're a coach like we have today, how to help your students and your athletes through that hump, across that hump of performance anxiety. Today we have with us my friend, Shalise Manza-Young. She's a former NFL writer, sports columnist. Right now she's a coach at one of our schools, and I'll let her tell you a little bit. And her daughters also are amazing performers that I've seen through Instagram. And so, Shalise, how do you get people over that hump?
Well, first of all, thank you, ladies, for inviting me to chat with you today. Um, I think the biggest thing that I've learned over time, I started coaching, I think like 16 years ago. And, I was really green. I had never coached before at any level. And so I began coaching. The school where I still am right now is an all-girls school, and our team is 7th through 12th graders. And at first, I only knew the way that I had been coached as a younger athlete, and so I wanted to try to model that. And then you learn that that doesn't work for everybody. And so I think as a parent, you should know your child better than other people. But as a coach or a teacher, it's a learning process to see, how does each child or each athlete respond? What do they respond the best to? And I think that's a big part of it. I think for most everybody, it's focusing on the positives. But it's just, I think, how you approach that. Some kids might, like it if you joke around with them. Other kids might like if you're very, like, almost quiet with them. Some kids prefer to be left alone until the last moment. So maybe you talk to them ahead of time and reinforce things. But I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, the biggest thing is figuring out what works best for each individual.
Now, I bet this would probably come with you, excuse me, knowing your students, what are some really good tips for helping them calm down and, other things besides taking several deep breaths to allay those fears? And I realized that the more you do it, the easier it is. But even when I perform any place, I still have that anxiety that comes up, that fear, like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. No, you don't. That kind of thing. So how do you help kids overcome that type of anxiety?
I think at the root, what I just try to convey to them is that they've put the work in. The thing that I love about track and field, and that I've always loved about track and field, is that if you put the work in, you will see concrete results back. So, in track, we talk a lot about PRs, which is your personal record, which, if you run the 200 meters and the first time you run the 200, you run 32 seconds. And then the next time you run 31.4 seconds, well, that's a new PR and you've shown improvement. So I talk to the kids. I do try to talk to as many kids as I can. Our team is very large. This past season, we had 50 kids on our team. I deal with about 2/3 of those girls on a regular basis. And so I try to approach all of them ahead of time. And like I said, some of them might need, I hug them ahead of time because sometimes I can see that they're really visibly nervous. So I'll just give them a hug and calm them down. And okay, remember what we've talked about. We have a race plan. Follow the race plan. Go hard out of the blocks. Try to float over the second 100 and those types of things. For others, it's more a little bit firm. Girls that I've known longer and I know how they respond. It's like, hey, look, you know how to do this, so get it done. And some kids respond to it that way. I think, again, you have to figure out. And with my own kids, it's similar. My kids aren't really athletes. They're more musically inclined. And so it's similar. Just how to do this. You've been practicing with your teacher. When you get up there, just take a deep breath. Think about what you're about to do. If there's any keys that your teacher has given you, your piano teacher, your drama teacher, think about one or two things. Take a deep breath. And the other thing I stress a lot is just have fun. None of it's rarely ever life and death. None of us are have 40 seconds to dislodge the bomb like we've seen in performances over the years. It's go run the track race. Go.
I think that's a major thing that a lot of adults miss, because we can get so wrapped up in wanting our child to win or be the best or be perfect, not make any mistakes. We could actually be the ones that cause them anxiety, when in fact, whatever you're doing should be fun. Now, I love track and field, and I actually coached track for several years at the school that my daughter went to, Betty Shabazz International Charter School. And I just basically wanted the children to have fun. I'm grateful that the parents were there and supportive, and we bring snacks and everything and encourage the children and all of that. But there would be times when I would see some coaches kind of scream at the children and make them feel bad if they lost and that kind of thing. I never wanted to do that. I always wanted our children to feel that it was fun, whether you won or lost. You got your team cheering for you, because things that go wrong when you're a child, they can either be handled in a way that you help them get through it, or it can be traumatizing, depending on what kind of memory you impress in their minds about that situation. There have been times when, of course, our children perform school plays and all that sort of thing. If you forget your lines, what happens, or if you're a piano recital and your fingers hit the wrong key. I think the most important thing that a parent can do, however your child performed, praise them for what they did. And if it didn't quite go right, hey, well, you recovered really well. You did a good job, or you kept going. That's great. I mean, find something good about it so they can feel good, not feel like, oh, I failed. Where everybody laughed at you. You messed up.
Right.
I've seen adults say things like that are just crushing, because probably somebody did that to them when they were a child. But I think knowing how to make them feel good, even if they didn't do their best performance, is so critical.
That was one of the things I really liked about my kids' coach when they were doing chess championships. For one, before, it's a great mental strain. Some of these things have a lot of mental anxiety. He would have them run around the track, do these exercises before they went in for where they were going to be sitting down and making chess moves. And at first I thought, what is the reason for that? Making them work out. Now they're going to be tired. But really, it energized them. So
Yeah.
some of those strategies are just amazing. Shalisa, what kind of strategies do you find are workable?
I mean, the biggest thing that I have really leaned into lately is positive self-talk. You know, it's I just want I have one athlete that I coach her privately one-on-one. Um, and she was going to Junior Olympic Nationals, in July, and we were doing some drills, and she was, really doing great. And so I was trying to tell her, like, what you're doing here, just bring it with you to Savannah. The championship meet was in Savannah. And she was like, well, but I want to do this. And I want to place really well. And I said, look, your goal should be to get a PR. If you do the best you've ever done, if you long jump farther than you've ever long jumped, if you run the hurdles faster than you've ever run the hurdles, and you don't make All America status, you did the best you could. It's there in black and white. You did the absolute best you could have done. And if 7 girls or 9 girls, whatever it was, that you just fell out of All America status were better than you that day, disappointment, yes, but don't be mad. I certainly won't be mad at you. And so with her and with my other athletes, if I talk to them before they get in the blocks or before, if they're doing a field event or whatever it might be, I try to remind them like 1 or 2 things before they start the race or start the event. Just if it's long jump, it's plant hard, drive your knee, reach for the sky. And it's just 1 or 2 things I want them when they're at the start of the runway, when they're right before they take off. I want them to be positive because, I think that's, as you said, Barbara, a lot of times, or Naima, a lot of times people, it's external that they're getting pressure. They feel like they have to do all of these things. And, it ends up harming the kids. And like you said, Naima, a lot of people project their own onto
anxiety
their kids,
onto the child. Yes,
we even try with my high school, middle school team. We try to, keep our antenna up. So if we do see a parent, then we will try to intervene somehow to get them to understand, like, or if we know that they're trying to overrule like what we want them to do in terms of practice or performance or whatever the case may be. It's a fine line, but we're there to coach. And to me, especially as I've gotten older, there's so much more to coaching than just go out and do this. Just go run 5 200s or go take 100 free throws, whatever it is. Those things are important, of course, but there's so much more to coaching than that.
Have you ever seen the movie Overcomer?
No.
I think it's by the Kendrick brothers. It focuses on this girl who her parents had broken up. They had been involved in drugs, and somehow she had been told that her father had died, but really he was in the hospital recovering. He had turned over a new leaf, and he really coached her in running this race. She had asthma. She used to steal as her coping mechanism. She would shoplift.
Oh, wow.
And the whole thing turned out to be so emotional. My daughter, who also runs, she's training for the upcoming Chicago triathlon, as a matter of fact, but she was in tears over this scene where her dad was coaching her and telling her each step of the way during this race.
That's why she had asthma. I remember seeing that. Yeah, I remember seeing that.
And the guy goes, "Is that Hannah? Run, Hannah!"
Yeah,
and that girl like scooped up. You got your heart in your throat. That was a overcomer. Yeah,
that was a good one. I remember that. And the thing about it, it makes it. I think I saw on, I think it was Facebook or something. Anyway, somebody was showing this guy running a race, and his mother was running right next to him. I guess she was just trying to, cheer him on and keep him running. And she's running along the track, outside the fence as he's running on the track. And somebody posted that on Facebook. I think it was hilarious, but sometimes
my father did that once. My father did that for me once. He really did. I think it was my junior year of high school, maybe my sophomore year. As it happened, we had a volunteer assistant coach with my high school track team, and his granddaughter ran for a different school. And so we ran against her. And my own coach, we were both hurdlers, 100 hurdlers. And my own coach said to me that I probably wasn't going to beat her. And so I told my father that. And my father, bless him, he was at I ran cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track. He was at every single solitary race I had for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I told him that, and similar thing, we had a thing. And of course, when I was young, when I was a freshman and sophomore, it embarrassed the heck out of me. But I would get in the blocks for the hurdles, and they would, right as I got settled in, he would yell, "Go, Shalise!" And of course, as I got older, I wasn't ready until I heard him say that. That was part of my routine.
So, gotta hear that.
I know he's right there next to me.
Yeah.
Go, Shalise. And so they do the gun, and I beat that granddaughter, and he was at the finish line next to me at the end of the race.
You about to make me cry.
He was right there next to me. And when I was young, we call it the Cabbage Patch, right? You do that. So my dad is my white parent, so there's not a ton of rhythm there, but we called it the Dance of Joy. And when I finished that race, he did the Dance of Joy with me, and it was obviously, 30 plus years later, it's still one of my favorite memories. But yeah, he was right there. My teammates were used to him by this point, because he kind of became the team dad. I went to a very working class high school in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and I was, the lucky one that my dad was able to be at all of our meets. And, a lot of the other kids, their parents just couldn't afford it, or their, work wouldn't allow that. So he just kind of became the team dad for everybody. They knew he was there. One time he was late, and high jump was at the very beginning of meets. And I had the best high jump meet I had ever had. And he missed it. And all of my teammates ran, "Mr. Manza, you missed it. Mr. Manza, you did so well."
Oh, wow.
So, and that's, it's funny because I think about that a lot. My dad, he was nothing but supportive. And it's funny when you think back, and what I know of him personality wise is he can be pretty intense. And so it's really incredible to me that he really was nothing but supportive. Like I said, he was at every single meet. In the summers, when I had to extend my mileage out to be ready for cross country season, I have exercise induced asthma. So I really couldn't run during the days because the humidity, I couldn't breathe. And so he would get on his bike, and he smoked cigars. So he'd be riding his bike, smoking a cigar as I ran at night to make sure that I was safe as I ran, through, our town and extended if I was going for like a 6-mile run or something like that. But yeah, it makes a difference.
It makes a big difference. And I think back, my father never missed a track meet that I had when I was in high school. And it matters knowing that your parent is there. It makes a big difference just emotionally, knowing that you have support. I used to feel so bad when I was teaching school, and going to the games and everything, and coaching some of the teams and so forth. and there'd be one or two of the players whose parents never came to
Mm-hmm.
the game, and I felt so bad because especially when they won, and there's like nobody for them. So we'd always for the parents who weren't there, some of us who were parents that were always supportive, we would make sure everybody felt good,
Yep.
cheer, hug, all that stuff, and make them feel special even though their family members were not there, because you do need to feel like someone cares, especially when you do some major thing, you win and all of that, so. And that's one thing I would say for parents: show up at your child's events. Leave work early, go to the school play. Make sure you take whatever you have to do. And if you're working a job that they don't think it's important enough for you to take off for your child, then you at the wrong job.
No, it's like I feel like I'm coming down with something here.
Right.
I don't want to get anybody else sick, so I'm going to leave. Um,
Oh, thanks.
it's funny because I did the same thing. I also remember that Daddy used to come when I was a tight net, and
Yes, he came to all your performances. Yes.
drill team, and I would dance. I was a performer that way because I'm not an athlete. Um, and he would come for that. And so when Sarah was in school, she was a cheerleader. And of course, I would go to the games when I could, which was most of the time before I went into work, and watch her. But then when track season came, I started, and she was hanging out with a bunch of these guys. They called themselves the cereal bars. There were a bunch of nice kids, all
Cereal
nice,
bars.
but they
Funny.
were all, well, a lot of them were track athletes. So I
Mhm.
would go to the track meets for them because a lot of them, these
Mhm.
were, a lot of these young Black boys, and they're all like their moms were nurses. In fact, a few of them end up being nurses themselves. But a lot
Mhm.
of them, they would say, "Well, my mom can't be here." I says, "Okay, that's all right. I'm your mom for the day." And I would
That's
be up there and I'd be screaming and yelling and acting a fool when they're running. But I don't want to say, because unfortunately, some of us cannot be embarrassed. Um, but it was really important for them to hear their name when if they were the last one across the line, I was going to still be yelling their name as they crossed the line. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
they finished, and sometimes that might be the only thing you can say. But that's good. You did a great job. You finished that race. It might have been last, but hey, but they got to feel like it was an achievement. However,
exactly.
it turned out.
Now, Shalise, you said something earlier about when you first started coaching, and then we want to get into a little bit more about the performing of your kids. But when you had said something that you started coaching one way, the way that you had been coached, and then you had to change. Now, how were you coached, and how did you change it?
So I coached, I guess it was more of like a one size fits all sort of, like I was the same way with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And our team was smaller then, so I actually could give kids more attention, but I sort of had like, it was just, I approached everyone the same way, not thinking about the
Different
differences. And as it
personality.
happened, I want to say like maybe 4 years in, I had a girl who was like on the spectrum, and her parent emailed me and just, very gently, was not harsh at all, said, "Hey, she's she's really doing well, but we I don't remember how it was worded, but essentially she's the one, and for her I had to be more cognizant that you have to approach different kids differently. She did not respond to, I have a tendency to be, ah, and she didn't really respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this like in a really positive, upbeat, like zany sort of way. As Cheryl said, some of us just can't be embarrassed. I literally, so when my kids are competing, my track athletes, I call them all my kids. Um, I can be to like on the opposite side of the track from them, and I'm just yelling at the top of my lungs, like, go, go, go. Like, I had to tone it down because a couple of times I yelled so hard for so long, I kind of made myself dizzy. So I had to tone that down. And I've had kids from opposing teams like look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, your coach is not like this, because this is how I coach. Every single one of my kids, we had 55 kids on the team this past spring. And it's hard, but I know every single kid's name when they're competing. I said I'd work directly with 2/3. The other 1/3 are our distance runners. And I have a phenomenal distance coach. And so she handles them 95% of the time. But I still know their names when they're competing. I know I actually have a spreadsheet with everybody's PRs and every event they've ever done. So after every meet, I go through the results, update their PRs if they got PRs, and
that's personal records if you all didn't
personal records. Yes, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
your personal best. And so one of the things I instituted a couple of years ago, is PR pops. And so because I keep that spreadsheet, the next time we're all together at practice after a meet, I bought a big container of lollipops and we all get together. And the beautiful thing about track, and I apologize for anyone out there whose kids are not in track, but to me, track is the best sport there is, in large part because you literally can see in black and white. And it doesn't matter how slow you are or how fast you are. Every kid gets a PR pop. It could be somebody who's running a 3-minute 800. Is that impressive?
Ooh.
No. But if she goes from 3 minutes flat to 2:58, she got a PR. So everybody claps and she gets the lollipop. And we have kids run up to us during the meet. Oh, I got a PR pop. I can't wait. I got a PR. I got a PR pop. But I think that goes back to what we had talked about. It's encouragement. Everybody,
self-esteem building.
Everybody, and it's team building. They feel seen. They feel loved in a way. I recently applied for a coaching job, and I had to do a cover letter, and it sounded a little hokey. And I was like, I kind of boil my approach down to leading with love. I of course demand that my kids work hard. It drives me crazy when I can tell that they're goofing off or slacking off or, whatever the case may be. But if they don't feel loved, they're not even going to want to come to practice.
Yeah. Well, that's a very critical thing. And one thing that I've noticed, even in coaching, and I coached track, that was my favorite sport. But there was a time when the basketball coach at the school had to take off because his wife had just had a baby, and the season was about to start and the team was all distressed. So I stepped in and said, well, I'll coach the basketball team. Of course, I knew nothing. So I'm going online and stuff, trying to, find plays, and I'm printing out sheets of, diagrams and everything. and we got through some games, and it didn't matter if we won or not. If anybody made a basket, we were happy. Okay, we scored. So so I was able to get them through that season where they at least were able to play, and then of course by the next season they've gotten better and everything. But what I learned from that like you say, sometimes it's just your personal best. Oh, you made a basket. Woo! I mean, hey, that's like 10 points down or whatever. You scored. And so, and it's more, and what I find is more important for the children to just be able to play, to be able to compete, to be able to participate. Because sometimes that's the only thing they excel in. During that time, I was also in the classroom teaching, and I noticed some of the athletes, they might not have been good students, but on the court or on the track, they were king, they were queen, they could, that's where they excelled. And so you have to find that thing that a child excels in, that builds their self-esteem, and it makes a difference. And sometimes I would use, okay, if you want to compete in the game, you better behave in class, and that would be their incentive to get themselves together. But a lot of times that's the thing that motivates them. And not everybody's going to be the top academic student, but they can feel good about themselves if they scored that winning basket. And that's what you want to make people feel like you want to make them to feel special about something, whatever their thing is that they can do.
Especially if they know that you are behind them. Now, my kids were all swimmers and they were in swim meets. And my son said to me, "You know, Mom, after we jump in the water, we can't hear you."
You're screaming your head off and they underwater, they hear a
But
thing.
all the parents were all into it anyway. It helped us. And then when they came out of the water at the end, they could tell that we were cheering for them.
Yes. Well, we got to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to talk about what do you do if your child is either being coached by somebody or taught by somebody who's really awful and making them feel bad. How do you handle that? How do you address that? How do you get that person perhaps to modify what they're doing because your child is coming home from practice or lessons or whatever, crying and upset? So how do you handle that? So we'll be right back after this quick break. So stay with us.
Hi, I'm Naima Latif, and if you're watching this, that means you're one of the 4.6 billion people from around the world who are using an electronic device to talk to people. In these times, people are using the internet to talk to everybody. Friends, neighbors, family members, co-workers. People are on their cell phones and computers all day long. Now, if you're in business, that is great news. That means you can sell your products and services all day long and never have to leave your home. All you need is a media connection, somebody to connect you to an audience. And that's why I'm talking to you today. We produce programs, and our audience members are people who shop. They buy clothes, food, beauty supplies, cleaning supplies, home repair, transportation services, child care services. Whatever you're selling, they need to buy it. We're your media connection. Just follow this link, and tomorrow you can sit back and relax at home while your business is making you money.
Yes, and you're back. And for those who just tuned in, you're watching Three Black Moms. And of course, now we're four moms that are really trying to make sure that our children enjoy the experience of performing. Now, I have an associate, wonderful woman, one of our host team on our daily show, and she was telling me this story that made me so sad because she plays piano, but she was telling me about how she was taught piano as a child. She had this piano teacher that every time she missed a note, the woman would hit her with a wooden stick. So at the end of every session, she's got marks all up and down her leg from being beaten. And it just made me want to cry. And I'm thinking, what kind of a horrible person does this? Yeah. So, I mean, of course, she hated it. And she learned how to play piano, and I guess she's good at it now. She plays different church functions and things like that. But the process of learning was so awful. And I'm wondering, number one,
that's abusive.
Yeah, why did they let that? But see, back in the day, if somebody's your coach or your teacher or something, you think that they're the authority. So however you think that they should do it. I mean, people let teachers beat their children all the time, in schools and so forth. Oh, that's how you have to learn.
Did it.
That's how they did it.
Lavinia's piano teacher would reward her. She would play for that lollipop. She would put like a quarter on your fingers, and you had to not let the quarter fall off.
Oh, now that's interesting. So, I mean, of course, positive reinforcement, like you said with the personal pops and all that. I mean, that's always better, but you do have those coaches that will, and those teachers that will help, that will just make your life miserable if you make a mistake and create so much anxiety. What do you do if your child has one of those kind of people that's helping them, and maybe they produce winners or great concert pianists or great vocalists or whatever, but your child is suffering because it's so awful? How do you handle that?
Well, hopefully your child is speaking up. As you said, if you're getting hit with the stick, then the bruises are probably visible, but for a lot of kids, particularly if it's like mental, you're not going to see it. So first and foremost, hopefully you have the type of relationship with your child that they will come and tell you that this is happening, or that you notice that something is happening. You know, that when they get home from practice, their disposition is very different than it is other days when they're not at practice, or whatever the case may be. I think you have to confront it. You know, I think part of me says it's like an old school thing. Um, you know, I covered the NFL for over a decade, and you know, some of the coaches, well, this is how I've always done it. Well, you know, things change.
Yes.
That's what happens. You know, things just because, and we hear this in all walks of life. You know, Cheryl knows it because we've been in journalism for so long, and we'll hear people say, "Well, I didn't get paid much money when I first started out." Well, that doesn't mean it was right.
Yes.
Right.
You
The
should be
draft
able,
doesn't mean it's not supposed to be.
you should be able to buy your groceries and work and enjoy your work. That's how it goes. Like, this is what we,
How it
you know,
should
just
be.
because you were, you know, screamed at as, you know, your coach screamed at you, so then you're going to do it forward. Or, you know, you've been coaching for 35 years and when you started, it was screaming. And again,
Yeah.
some people, that's how you may have handled it. And, but you probably do have a generation of athletes who
That's
hated
how they
it,
learn.
or they
Yeah.
carry scars, or, you know, I don't think he would mind me saying this, but my husband has told me the stories before. You know, he was a four sport athlete growing up, and his mother was incredibly hard on him, incredibly hard on him. And then one day she, I don't know, I don't remember the event that made her see it, but one day she just went to him and she apologized profusely. She said,
Wow.
"I am so sorry. I should not have been doing it this way." Now, she took too far of a step back. He'll say that, you know, he might have made it to the NFL if she had kept pushing him. But there's obviously, there's a fine line. And again, hopefully your child comes to you and then you need to step up. And if it is a situation where you can move the child to a different coach or a different teacher or whatever it is, then hopefully you're
Yeah.
able to do that. You know, hopefully financially it's something you could do, or if there's a geographic, you know, element to it, that finding a new coach means driving an extra 20 minutes, you know, that might make it harder. But I think first and foremost, if the coach doesn't respond, then, or the teacher or whomever it might be, try to get them away, because it's just, you know, obviously there's extremes. I'm thinking about Simone Biles and all those gymnasts, and Larry Nasser and the Karolis, and that's extreme.
Exactly.
But look how long that secret was kept. So
Yeah.
you need, you know, there were hundreds of young girls who ended up being abused by Larry Nasser. The Karolis did a number on them, how abusive they were, and, you know, forced girls into, you know, eating disorders and things like that with the way that they were. So that's on the extreme end, the worst of it. But even if somebody's putting your kid down, you know, that's not what we're here for. You know, like we said at the beginning, we're here to have fun. We're here to learn something new. We're here because we're trying to figure out, do we love violin? Maybe we're not going to like violin ultimately, but at least help me learn it. If I don't like it, okay, maybe I'll move on to something else. But I don't want to leave because you've made it so torturous for me that I don't want to keep going back.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Carolis because that's exactly, you took that right out of my head. I was thinking about how in gymnastics they tend to allow that kind of abuse because they get results.
Right.
And now Sarah was a gymnast for 8 years, but that was in between. She was dancing and doing 500 other things. But she would go to the gym, and then I could see her improve. But they had a softer approach. And one of her close friends, when she moved, she didn't want to go. She wanted to keep going to that gym, but eventually she left, and there were other kids who left because the gymnastic coach wasn't as hard on them. But I think it was because he knew he wasn't coaching Olympians. You know, this was in Winthrop. It's you know, and they would go to meets and they would do a lot of things. Regional, but he wasn't going to be coaching any Olympians. I think the one of his best students, she got into a D3 school in gymnastics. but he knew that. So it was there for the kids to kind of learn a skill. In fact, today I asked Sarah, I says, "Can you still do any of that gymnastic stuff?" She says, "No." She says, "No." Um, but that was the thing, and that's the problem. Sometimes the problem is the parent will allow that abuse to happen because they're
Yeah.
getting skills.
They
And
want to make a champion. They want to win. They want to be the
and
best.
they get money signs in their eyes,
Yeah.
in their eyes, and so they're thinking, oh, they're going to make it to the NBA or the NFL or whatever, and
Hmm.
so they stop thinking
Be
about
a
this.
star and have to be a
That's
Joe Jackson.
Yeah, they're looking for
Lead
that
your
new
children
house
to
that
success.
they're going to buy you when they make it, and so
Mhm.
they can add to that performance anxiety, and it probably even goes to artistic things like piano or voice
Mhm.
or acting. You have a lot of child
Yeah.
actors that were abused,
Yes. They're
tons of
coming out
them,
about it now. Yeah.
and
How they
because
were
they
treated.
didn't have that whole thing of, "Mom, I don't like this anymore," because maybe their paycheck is feeding the family. So
And
we have,
sometimes that's what it is when
yes,
things
yes.
like acting, where you become. I remember who's what's her name? Drew Barrymore. I think
Mhm.
I was at your house when I read her autobiography, and she was talking about that whole thing with her parents bringing her scripts while she was in therapy. Because she had just gone through a lot of trauma. But they were still kind of pushing her to be this actress, and a lot of parents do that because they are seeing the potential of a successful child who could then feed the family if they get the right role and get famous. And so they look the other way when it comes to whether or not that child's well-being is really looked after. And
I
I think,
think we're seeing that more and more now with,
Yes,
content creation and this influencer culture and TikTok and Instagram and
yeah,
YouTube. You're seeing kids who, now might be in their early 20s, and their parents started putting them on camera when they were 7, 8, 9 years old. And like you said, the family's income
Or
is
three.
dependent, right? And the
mhm,
family's income becomes dependent on putting the kid on camera and putting them, oh, let's there's one kid, I forget what his name is, but he started just opening toys on camera. My
Yes.
kids were watching it all
was
the
it Rodney
time.
Allen Rippey or no? It was.
Yeah,
No,
I
this
tried opening presents in front of a camera and I didn't get that kind of response.
but this, the family became super dependent, and especially this, I can't, Ryan, his name's Ryan. Um, that they had deals where he had his own branded toys, because they would come. I hate these stupid things. You guys all have older children, so you probably don't have to deal with this. But you would get this plastic ball, and there would be like 12 items inside, and they were each individually teeny tiny wrapped. And so
Oh,
you end up with this, there's just this giant pile of crap on the table, like the little wrapping paper and all
oh
this kind of stuff.
wow.
But that kid Ryan, he was the family. The parents quit
Mm,
their jobs because he had to
wow.
crank out the videos a couple days a week, and then, like I said, they signed contracts. And you are seeing now, you can find stories of kids who are over 18, maybe in their mid 20s, and their parents were on the early end of this, content creation crap, and they're traumatized. It
Yeah.
ruined their relationship with the parents, because the parents were just like, oh, money, money, money.
Yeah.
We have to get in front of the camera today. Money, money, money. And it's all, all of it. I think, whether it's athletics or performance and these types of things. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, a lot of it is parent driven. And
Yeah.
it's hard to ask the parents. I mean, it's hard to ask the coaches sometimes to be better when the parents aren't being best for their kids. They
Yeah.
want them, you know, IMG Academy down in Florida. It's like, well, I'm paying 60 grand a year for you to get specialized basketball training. So if you don't go Division 1 and get a full scholarship, and it's like, by the time you finish paying off IMG, you could have just paid the college, but whatever.
Yes.
And it's all those kinds of things.
Yes.
I've
Sometimes
bemoaned
agree.
youth. It's a lot. It's little kids, and it stays with you.
Yes.
It does. And sometimes the success isn't even worth it if you've got all these emotional problems as an adult.
Yeah.
What was it all for in your life?
Mhm.
Yeah, you got fame, but you got a drug problem, you got, multiple failed relationships, you got, your own children traumatized because you weren't there for them. All these multiple things that go wrong when the foundation is wrong because your parents pushed you because they didn't really care about your well-being. So you have to
They
look at
didn't
down
think
the
that
road.
and that's the thing is that sometimes we can convince ourselves of all kinds of lies. I don't
Mhm.
think parents actually it's not that they don't care about your well-being, it's that they have convinced themselves that this is what is best for you.
Yeah,
Mm.
they're benefiting, but oh, it's best for
Now,
you.
Shalise has
And
young
you're living their dream. They're living the
Yeah,
dream that you
yes,
want.
they're
Yes.
living
Yes.
vicariously through you. Yes.
yes. Now, Shalise, you have younger kids, and your daughters. I know that they're singers and drama and that kind of stuff. How do you keep that perspective for them so that they know, okay, if you do great, great. If you don't, that's great too. Get out there, do your best, have fun, and not let them be influenced by all the TikTokers and content creators so that because they're growing up, your kids are alpha generation.
Mhm.
So they're growing up and the internet has always been here, just
Yes.
you know,
Yes. It's a
Yeah.
way of life for
always been
them.
there. So how do you reel that in so that their anxiety or they don't get anxiety or they can manage it?
Well, from a social media perspective, so our younger two are 11 and a half, and my youngest is about to be 10 in 2 weeks. And then we also have a child who is 22. So really, all three of them only know the internet, which I'm sure you guys have had those incidents where it's like, well, Mommy, was YouTube around when you were little? No, no, it was not. The Cosby Show came on Thursday nights at 8 o'clock, and if you missed it, too bad.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
there was
That's
that's just
it.
how it went. Um, with so I think I'm fortunate. My youngest, she just has she just goes out there and does it.
Mhm.
She just, she does her piano recitals twice a year. Most of the time, she doesn't even have her sheet music. She memorizes it. She sits down, she does it, she stands up, she does her bow, and that's it. She doesn't really express ahead of time that she's nervous. She just goes up there, does it, that's it. She's fine. Our middle one is very much into performing. Um, and so she's harder on herself than I probably would be. And again, I mean, I say it's low stakes, but even if it was higher stakes, it, I want them first and foremost to learn. We told them if they want to do music, we wanted them to start with piano before they go to another instrument because we feel like
Yeah.
piano is a good foundational instrument to have before you
Yeah.
go to something else. Our oldest did piano, now does guitar, owns a ukulele, has branched out. So Simone, my middle one, in the spring, she has taken voice lessons and piano lessons, and this was the first time where she played piano and sang at the same time. And she picked a song from Wicked. So of course she picked like one of the hardest songs she could have found. And when she was done, she was just upset with herself because she felt like she didn't play the piano as quickly as she was supposed to keep pace with the singing and all of that stuff. And we just, my husband and I just looked at her and we're like, you did amazing. You
Yeah.
are. And other people who were there and other teachers looked at her like, you are 11 years old and you played one of the hardest songs and sang one of the hardest songs. It's, you should be proud. And so, we're very fortunate that they're in a community like that. Um, And so she's actually now the summer camp puts on a musical. And so she's the lead. They're doing Anastasia. And actually, right now, my youngest and my middle are running the lines because Simone feels like she's not ready yet. She's supposed to be off book in just a couple of days and know her whole entire script. And she's the lead. So, she has a lot of words and she has to know the songs and all that kind of stuff. So I know she's funny because she'll lead up and she kind of walks around like she knows that she's really good, and then she's hard on herself if she feels like she hasn't done the way she could have. And I think like we've talked about, it just all goes back to you've been practicing all this time. If you make a mistake, it's okay. It's at the end. And I hope, and we know that not all parents do, but they're not going to have good memories of it. They're not going to want to continue necessarily if they don't enjoy it, or if they're scared that you're going to be upset because they made a mistake. So it's hard. And again, I think it goes back to each child. Like I said, my youngest goes up there, does her thing, does her bow, walks away. Never just seems completely, yeah, there's just seems completely oblivious. If there should be pressure or there should be nerves, is completely oblivious to it. Does her thing, moves on. Simone gets upset with herself after the fact. I have seen nervousness. The very first time she performed, she was grabbing at the skirt of her dress, and I was like stunned because we'd be in the car and they're constantly singing in the car, and this was about 3 years ago, and she got in front of the microphone and she was so quiet, and I was like, who is this little girl? Like, here's the little girl that's always in the car with me. And so I did kind of say something after, but trying to be cognizant that you can sing the song, it's okay. She hasn't really shown that nervousness since, but that first time, and when she was done and after I said, oh, you did a great job, after the praise, then I was like, hey, how come, why were you so nervous? What happened? And I think that's
you just had that moment of self-doubt,
Right.
And sometimes when it's your first time or one of your earliest times, you are not expecting the fear that kind of overcomes you. I remember this book I read a long time ago called Julie's Heritage, and she was a singer, and her friend from high school had invited her to sing at some event that her church was putting on. And she gets up in front of the audience, and all of a sudden she had no volume in her voice. She was like, oh my goodness, what happened to my voice? And she had 3 songs that she was going to sing. She was going to sing 2 of them and then sing the third one when they called for an encore. They didn't ask for an encore, and she got her feelings hurt, and this was a story on her dealing with her own identity, with the racial situation that had come up. Her white friends had ditched her because they wanted to pledge a sorority, but they weren't going to be able to pledge if they had a black friend. So there were a lot of other things that were involved. It's called Julie's Heritage. I can't remember the name of the author. It's a book I read back in 8th grade, but I since read it again. You get different views when you read a book that you have read as a child and you read it as an adult and you see other underlying stories. But I definitely remember that one scene where she was so nervous that it came out in her losing all the volume.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that, and everybody has a memory of that moment where, either stage fright or whatever. I think I remember my first time performing at a Sunday school play or something, and me and the other girl was supposed to each say a line, and I looked at her say her line, and for some reason mine just wouldn't come to mind, so I just ended up not saying it, and I don't know what happened, but I was 3, Or maybe, so
That's
I mean, it wasn't traumatizing. I have since been able to speak publicly.
very
But
first.
sometimes, parents can make it so bad that that's the thing that you remember. Because if they ridicule you, what's wrong with you? How come you didn't say anything? Then
Yes, yes.
terrified forever.
The very first time we saw her dance, she was 3 years old. She had done this little quick summer camp, and it was like a 4 week session. At the end, they invite the parents to come in. And so we were on our way there. And this is something I will blame Sean for forever.
For
He
sure.
decided on our way there, he inexplicably decided he had to go stop and get a newspaper. Why? I don't know. So we get there and everybody is already there. Now she hasn't had time to prepare because she's freaked out because
Mm.
all these parents are in here where she hadn't been expecting that. So the first half of the class, she did nothing. Now, granted, she's 3 years old, so I'm good, but I'm mad at him because we could have gotten there early and gotten her set up.
Settled.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't until the second half of the class when they put the tap shoes on, then she kind of got really relaxed. But for the first time, they couldn't get her to do anything. She was paralyzed with fear. Today, 23 years later, I'm still mad. So can you say he knows how to hold a grudge? Um, but that's the thing. Sometimes, and I was probably more traumatized. She probably doesn't even remember, but I was more traumatized.
At 3, she probably does not.
I was more traumatized for her because I said, and that's the one thing I can say. If you can prepare your kids and get them the tools that they need, they won't be as scared. And if they do get scared, it's okay. Like you
Yeah.
said, none of this stuff is life and death. It's just, you don't have to disable, the bomb or cut the red wire, but first, so
Yeah.
we
Yellow wire.
But that's the thing, though. Sometimes we feel worse when our children make a mistake than when they do. I think, well, I think all of Zakia's performances that she did, I don't remember any really awful thing. I know she was a little bit nervous at her 8th grade graduation doing the piano, uh, because some things can't end up out of order with how they had planned for the program. So she ended up having to come on before, the time that she was expecting. But she did fine because she had wanted me to listen to it before we left the house. She said, "Well, Mom, just listen to me play." I said, I don't want to hear what it sounds like because I don't want to be listening for, did you mess up? So however you sound, I'll think it's okay because I don't know how it's supposed to sound. And so it turned out that was it. However she did, I thought it was wonderful. She thought she might have made some mistakes, but I didn't hear it because I didn't know what it was supposed to sound like. So sometimes it's just better if you don't know all the things that are supposed to happen. And, if they miss a line in a play or whatever, it's okay. Praise them anyway, because we all make errors. But I think sometimes parents do feel worse than the child because you want them to be good and you are feeling that they are probably really horribly embarrassed, but they might not be, especially at 3. They probably won't remember. I mean, I was 3. I don't feel any deep sense of shame that I didn't remember my Sunday school play.
and yet you brought it up. So
I forgot to say that.
So I really do have some deep trauma on that, right? But I think the one thing that we can learn, at least, is to make whatever our children do fun, so that it doesn't end up being a trauma and it doesn't end up changing their mind about doing something that they might have a talent for or a skill for. So make it fun, whatever it is.
Yeah, there's lessons of perseverance, certainly. Um, but, I think, like we talked about how it used to be back in the day, that's not what was the right thing always. There are some people who do respond to really hard pressure, but I think for a lot of people, especially when they're younger, it's, hey, we're doing this and let's go have fun. And if there are like quantifiable things that you can see. You know, Barbara's kids swam. We talked about track. You can see like, oh, I'm getting better. I practiced really hard the last few weeks, and you know, I did my fastest 100 free that I've ever done.
Yeah.
If it's not something like that, you still support. I mean, for most of us, probably if our kids are on a stage, we probably haven't been on a stage before, or we have a similar experience with some kind of pressure, but not the same. And you know, if we should just be looking to uplift and support first and foremost.
Just have fun. Well, we've got to go, people. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us. And for those who want to get in touch with Shalise, there's at Blue Sky. You can reach her at Shalise M. Young, and she's a contributing freelance writer with the
Contrarian.
She's a track and field coach.
So subscribe to the Contrarian, so that we can make sure that this lady gets paid.
We're
There
fighting
you
for
go.
democracy.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right. Subscribe. Well, thanks so much. We appreciate you for joining us today. And if you've got
Shalise,
a
it was
child,
wonderful.
Yeah, you guys, it was
we
great.
learned a lot. And if you've got a child that's in sports or any kind of performing arts, just make sure they're having fun and praise them, whether win, lose, do
Or
their
draw.
best, or win, lose, or draw. Yes, make sure they have fun. And make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook, and follow us every Sunday at 3 Black Moms. And until next week, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. Thank you, Shalise, for being here.
Thank
We
you.
are 4 Black moms. Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black Moms.